This video is brought to you by Squarespace. When it comes to websites, online stores, etc., there's no place to build a beautiful online presence like Squarespace. Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of a series I want to try called Knife Out, where I review a film and pair it with a meal. This week we're talking about Adam McKay's Don't Look Up, and we'll be pairing it with Aaron Clark's delicious adult mac and cheese, a mac and cheese that feels like it's a step up from others, but is at the end of the day a mac and cheese. I actually think Adam McKay, as a filmmaker, has a lot in common with mac and cheese. He's been a part of some projects you think are absolute all-timers, even if he isn't the most important part of them. Some of his classics are a bit on the silly side, and his films, like Macaroni, are very much empty tubes. They're deceptive in how full and fancy they may look, some of them despite just being another noodle. And for Don't Look Up's Macaroni, I wanted to pick a box that takes itself seriously. After some heavy consideration at the grocery store, I decided to go with this pack because it was the most expensive, and this is an expensive movie. For starters, you're going to want to bring a large pot of water to a boil and then pace around trying to figure out what to do next. For a movie that applies heat to the situation and then doesn't know what to do with it, that seemed appropriate. But maybe we start rallying the troops and cut up some of that fresh rosemary we bought into a tablespoon's worth. And that simple task took you long enough that your water should be ready to dump the pasta in. Give that a little stir, and now it's onto the skillet. Drizzle a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil and a tablespoon of butter onto the pan, and now it's time to break out the shiitake mushrooms. The mushrooms are kind of one of the main events of this dish, and I'd honestly consider them the Nicholas Bertel of our meal. They're probably the healthiest part, they may just be the most interesting addition, they're why you tuned into the dish to begin with, but as you'll come to see, I didn't really do it right. I feel like I didn't get the most out of these mushrooms, which is only right for a film that didn't get the most out of Nicholas Bertel. In the process of giving these boys a bath, I ended up dumping a good amount of the water into the pan, making for a pool of mushrooms and olive oil and butter. And with my timing and my proportions, I just don't know if it all mixed together in the best way. They came pre-chopped, but I also probably should have chopped them up a little smaller. But we just keep stirring and hope for the best. Around this time, your pasta should be done cooking, so go ahead and drain that in a colander. After about 5 minutes, the mushrooms will appear slightly brown, and it's around this time where you stir in that tablespoon of chopped rosemary, as well as your half teaspoon of kosher salt. Next, it's time to sprinkle in your flour, and you realize the flour I thought I had in this container is actually sugar. Run around your kitchen, checking every drawer in the apartment until you realize you actually don't own flour, and just keep stirring and add a cup of milk. Without flour, this meant you weren't able to really thicken the sauce. I barely cook, so I don't own any reasonable substitutes, which means we end up with a sort of watery concoction, and I think Don't Look Up could in many ways use some thickening as well. One of the many issues with this movie is how aimless it feels. It feels like the main objective is to let off some steam, no pun intended, and just throw in a bunch of things that are technically healthy and that work, like getting high-profile actors to draw attention, an accessible style to guide the viewer, a little bit of green, some mushrooms. But without a thickener, you really just end up with a watery movie that feels like it serves no real purpose other than to be angry at the world, so you add the spices. Our spices today are ground pepper, nutmeg, and garlic powder, and I'd say these are the Ariana Grandes and Kid Cudis of this meal. They're kind of here to, well, spice things up, add some sort of interest. But as you can probably tell, I just bought these at the store today, and I'm just now opening them, the same way Adam McKay clearly doesn't actually know how to use these figures. I overdo it on the pepper, and McKay overdoes it on the boomer perspective of contemporary influencers. It doesn't ruin the dish by any means, but you can tell someone got a little carried away and just learned what a meme was yesterday. And now, it's time for the cheese. Today I'm using a block of Fontina and a block of sharp cheddar, shredding them each into a 3/4 of a cup in the sloppiest way imaginable. You probably saw this coming from a mile away, but one of the main reasons I picked mac and cheese is because this movie is cheesy as hell. It's a movie and dish that simply does not exist without a healthy amount of cheese being distributed in the messiest, clumpiest, and most disruptive way imaginable. Smother it all together, making sure you have a wet, even coating going on, and now things are starting to make sense. Next, it's time to make your topping. Take a small mixing bowl and combine 3 tablespoons of butter, 3/4 cup of seasoned panko breadcrumbs, and half a cup of grated Parmesan cheese, because, you know, some more cheese would make sense. Stir until evenly moistened, and there you have your topping. To have a breadcrumb topping makes total sense to me for this pairing. Anything with a bready topping is really appealing to me. Who doesn't like a little crispiness? And on the surface, Don't Look Up seems kind of appealing. A movie that is trying to tell the story of America's lack of response to urgent issues seems good on paper, and to tell it in a Dr. Strangelove-like tone seems like a pretty entertaining and grim time. Sounds appetizing. But then you realize it's time to put it in the oven, and you don't own a casserole dish. So you just kind of throw it on a baking sheet, really spread it out all over the place, which is really just the cherry on top of this extremely embarrassing process. So just let that bake for about 10 minutes on 375. After doing that, look around and take in the mess you made. I mean, even the rosemary got a little crazy back there. And while we clean, let's talk about this movie. I don't hate that Don't Look Up exists, but I do have to wonder why it exists. Is it to inform people on what's going on? Because I'm pretty sure the only people that would have interest in giving the film a chance are the ones that are already on board with what's going on. The people who maybe don't believe in climate change, etc., are likely not going to come close to this movie, let alone sit through its entirety and walk away with a difference. I feel like Adam McKay's past work has served a purpose in informing the audience on how the world is falling apart through the stock market and through the Bush era, and now through climate change. But for something as widely known and as urgent as climate change, it's rare you're going to make a difference in a film that is lacking any sort of compassion for its target audience, as it chooses instead to yell at you for 2 hours and a half about how we are to blame, when in reality it's like, hey, what are you doing, Adam McKay? It's an entertaining film that'll hold your attention, and yes, I did have a little bit of fun with it, but one of the most frustrating things is being on a sinking boat with someone and having that someone yell at you for sinking the boat, when in reality they aren't doing anything to help it but bringing awareness by letting everyone know that the boat is sinking. That's what this movie is. Looks like the dish is done and, looks okay. Get a spatula and scoop some of your slop into a bowl, and let's give it a taste. I was pretty surprised at how good the dish actually was, even if it didn't look that appealing. It had lots of flavor going on and was definitely cheesy, which I think is good, but I don't know if it was the mushrooms or what, but the more I ate, the less appetizing it got, to a point where I really didn't feel like having any more of it, which, is kind of what happened with this film. By the 90-minute mark, you really feel like it should be wrapping up, only to realize you have fully another 45 minutes to get through, and you really gotta wonder, what is the rest of this really gonna do for me, other than give me a serious stomachache? And I think that's gonna do. Thanks for watching. Check out Don't Look Up and form your own opinion. Check out the link to the recipe in the description, and before you head out, I wanna thank Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Now, Squarespace, if you didn't already know, is a place where you can go online to build your brand, whether that be an online store, a blog, a portfolio, you name it. They have professional portfolio designs where you can create galleries for your work and password protected pages to share work with clients. I love their video block feature, which allows me to show off some of my favorite YouTube videos as well as any other work that I have going on. And they have a built-in mobile web designer, which makes it so that any website you make will automatically work really well on any mobile device and match your style in the process. The best part about it all, though, is that if you go to squarespace.com/Karsten, you can get 10% off of your first purchase. So really, there's no reason not to give it a shot. Thanks again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Thanks for watching this video. And you know what? I'll see you in the next one.